Hi, I'm John LeMay, and right now we're in the Historical Society for Southeast New Mexico, located in Roswell. Now, when most people hear the word Roswell, they think of UFOs and aliens. But long before the aliens landed, Roswell played a part in the Lincoln County War and featured such historical characters as Pat Garrett, Outlaw Billy the Kid, and a cattle baron named John Chisum. Now, like I said before, when most people hear the word Roswell, they just think of aliens. But in truth, Roswell has a rich history dating back to the Lincoln County War. The famous war saw rich landowners fighting it out over land, cattle, and of course, politics. On one side of the war was Lawrence G. Murphy and James Dolan, aligned with the notorious Santa Fe Ring. On the other side was an Englishman named John Tunstall, a lawyer named Alexander McSween, and a very wealthy cattle baron called John Chisum. Now, second to Billy the Kid, John Chisum was probably the most recognizable name to emerge from the Lincoln County War, which was fought back in the 1870s. Now, many years later, this cattle war provided the inspiration for several Hollywood westerns, all of which always focused on Billy the Kid, except for one. In 1970, John Wayne starred as the title character in Chisholm. The epic western was mostly historically accurate, but more importantly, for audiences, it provided grand gunfights, great songs by Merle Haggard, and of course John Wayne as John Wayne. In reality, the Duke was playing the same on-screen persona he always did. Not only did the movie have John Wayne's version of Chisholm deliver the killing blow to the bad guy, it also presented him as living just outside the town of Lincoln, while in reality, John Chisum lived here, in Roswell, a fact that the film's screenwriters chose to conveniently overlook. So how about we take a trip around Roswell to learn about the real John Chisum? When John Chisum first came to the Roswell area, it was not yet a town. All it comprised of was two buildings built by a notorious gambler named Van C. Smith in the early 1870s. As you can see, Roswell has grown a great deal since then. Right now we're in downtown Roswell at a spot we call Pioneer Plaza. This is where Roswell's first two buildings used to stand. Today, it houses the beautiful John Chisum statue, sculpted by Robert Summers of Texas, who also, just by coincidence, happened to sculpt John Wayne. Another reason we're here is we're about to visit with one of our town's premier ufologists, or someone who studies UFOs. Now you might ask, what does UFOs have to do with John Chisum? Nothing. But Dennis used to give a driving tour of Roswell to eager tourists who wanted to learn more about the town, and this was one of his most popular stops.
My name is Dennis Ballfacer. I've been a UFO researcher for the last 30 years, and I did Roswell UFO tours and historical tours here in Roswell for about 7 years. The city of Roswell is kind of fortunate to have two historical statues from the Old West here, done by the same sculptor. One is Pat Garrett, who was better known for supposedly killing the outlaw Billy the Kid, and the other one is this John Chisum statue behind me. Chisum was in the late 1800s. He was the biggest cattle producer in the nation at the time. And at one time, Chisum had one herd of 80,000 longhorn steers. Over a 12-year period, he moved about 300,000 cattle. He'd bring them up from Texas, rest them and feed them here, and then take them up east and up north, sell them at the markets. The sculptor is from Texas and knows quite a bit about cowboys and horses and cattle, as seen on these statues. And one of the unique things about the statues is the fact that the sculptor identified his work by putting Bible verses all over the statue. He hid them. That was his way of showing that it was his work. He also did some things with the Chisum statue that you wouldn't see normally, such as having the initials of John Chisum on the spurs of his boot, splitting the ears of the cattle, which was Chisum's way of identifying the cattle that belonged to him. So we're extremely fortunate to have these two statues here in Roswell, done by the same sculptor from Texas. There's a lot going on here that people don't know about, and for you to come here and visit and look at this stuff, I think you'll be surprised.
As I watched Dennis point out the various hidden markings and scriptures on the sculpture, I took note of the fact that John Chisum was on a horse, which is exactly what you'd expect him to be on. However, I once attended a lecture given by painter Kim Wiggins who told me something different. John Chisum didn't always ride a horse, so I decided to take a trip to the Roswell Museum and Art Center to visit with Kim in person and take a look at his painting currently located in the museum vault.
I'm Kim Wiggins. I'm an artist from Roswell, New Mexico. I grew up on a ranch north of town, and today I make a living painting and celebrating the American West through historical works. The question is, what kind of role did John Chisum play in the Lincoln County War? No, John Chisum didn't have a gun strapped on and ride into the town of Lincoln and face Billy the Kid. Of course, that would be inaccurate. And of course, the Hollywood version of Chisum is much different than the true life story. Chisum was involved heavily, though. He was a major backer of McSween and Tunstall. On the other hand, there's the Murphy-Dolan factor. These were two mercantiles that were fighting against each other. And one was supported in Santa Fe and the other one was supported by John Chisum in southern New Mexico to try and bring some reasonable prices to the cattlemen in this part of the country. And of course we know Tunstall ends up being murdered on the road coming from Ruidoso to the town of Lincoln. And that's where Billy the Kid comes into the story, because Billy the Kid worked for Tunstall. He was acquainted with John Chisum and actually worked for Chisum for a while as well, so they definitely knew each other. And John Chisum had a bodyguard that Chisum didn't carry a weapon. He didn't wear a pistol, and so you might see that in the movie. But he had a bodyguard, Frank Chisum. Frank Chisum was bought in 1861 and set free by John Chisum. And so Frank Chisum, his original name was Frank Benjamin Franklin Daly, and he changed his name to Frank Chisum after John Chisum gave him his freedom. And so this was his free man's name, and this is how he referred to himself for the rest of his life, because he worked as a free man, and later on Chisum supplied him cattle, and Frank Chisum became a rancher in the Roswell, New Mexico area, and lived here the rest of his life. John Wayne, he does come flying in on a horse and has the very dramatic entrance that Hollywood always gives the leading man. John Chisum, on the other hand, he rode a mule, and he preferred the mule because of their sure-footedness and the gait. And on this particular cattle drive, this is the most noted cattle drive in American history. This is Chisum, this is Goodnight, and this is Loving. This was the basis, this drive, for the Goodnight Loving Trail. And so the trail was named after Loving and Goodnight, but Chisum was the man who secured the contract from a New York firm to supply beef to the military. And this beef was to be delivered over the course of the next couple of years, and they were to supply 10,000 head of longhorns to these outposts in New Mexico territory. And Chisum actually rode a mule, and he had his pistol strapped over his saddle horn. So it's much different than what you see in the Hollywood glamorized version of the American cowboy.
After our visit with Kim Wiggins, we decided to come and check out the real Pecos River, east of Roswell. It's hard to believe that this is the actual land that men like John Chisum, Pat Garrett, and Billy the Kid rode across. And speaking of Billy the Kid, after the Lincoln County War, he stole a lot of cattle from John Chisum, which consequently led to John Chisum playing a huge role in the capture and killing of Billy the Kid. But that's a story for another time. But the more important takeaway about John Chisum is he played an indelible part in the formation of Roswell in its early years and helped it to become the town that it is today. As you can see, there's a lot more to the history of Roswell, New Mexico than just crashed UFOs and aliens. In fact, what we showed you today was only the tip of the iceberg. I'm John LeMay. Thanks for watching.